Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Smedley, Associate Director at Acuity, and I'd like to welcome you to our third webinar in our May series. I'd also like to welcome Emma Foxall, Deputy Housing Ombudsman, who's kindly agreed to provide us with an update. She'll be covering basically how the service has flexed its approach since the onset of coronavirus. Its expectations of housing providers, what kind of complaints they're getting, what we can learn from their caseload, and then a little bit about looking into the future about how the Ombudsman role might change when we finally get the white paper.
Hi, thanks everybody for being here and for inviting me to speak today. I hope everybody's safe and well at home. So as already said, I'm going to set out what we've been doing during the pandemic before moving on to look at some of the changes that are coming. Okay. So broad brushstrokes picture of where we are. Last year we had 2,296 member landlords. We look at complaints from residents from social landlords. Of those landlords, we have 1,904 housing associations, 319 local authorities, and 73 voluntary members who are sort of a mix of charities and private landlords, and they comprise about 19.5 households there. So that means that just under 4.5 million households have free access to the Ombudsman Service as and when they need it. Last year we dealt with 15,832 complaints and inquiries, and of those, the sort of 2,139 were investigated. There's not necessarily a straightforward follow through from that. It all depends when a complainant gets in touch with us, but basically 81% of the cases we dealt with didn't go forward to investigation. Some of those would have been resolved in the landlord's complaint procedure. We would hope the bulk would get resolved there, but sometimes we just don't know what the outcome was. You know, we give advice and the complainant doesn't come back to us. Our top cause for complaint, our favourite complaint that comes to us is always concerning responsive repairs. Second place is ASB with complaint handling in third last year. It is always those top three. I have worked for the Ombudsman for way too many years, but in every year it's always responsive repairs is the top complaint, with ASB and complaint handling swapping positions every now and then, but always in close second and third place. So just to give you a sort of flavour of what it is we deal with, really. Okay, so prior to the pandemic, we did have some working at home. Our offices are in I would say central London, but it's actually it's out by the Isle of Dogs. But they're London based, and staff are expected to hot desk. We don't have enough space for each member of staff to have their own desk. Staff were encouraged to work from home and were allowed to do so for up to 2 days a week. Most staff took advantage of those 2 days, but some staff really were not into working from home and never worked from home. So it's a bit of a mix there. We took the decision to remain open. We transitioned to 100% remote working very early on. We made sure all staff had the kit, if you like, already because of the working at home for 2 days. A couple of problems. There are a few people who, as I say, didn't like working from home and actually weren't very equipped. Some people didn't have Wi-Fi, so there had to be this little handful of cases that we had to go through some machinations to get that up and running. Our phones, we have an inquiry service in Liverpool, and they remained open. So phones have been open throughout. emails been dealt with throughout. The web page, complaints coming through that way have been dealt with throughout. Post has been dealt with, but is slower to be dealt with. It does require somebody going to a central office to pick up the post. So instead of that, well, it used to be that people were in the office, so they didn't have to make that journey there. But so instead of that happening on a daily basis, it is only collected weekly. But we are still getting to it, but there will be delays there. So why did we decide to stay open? Largely because we just decided it brings a benefit to both residents and landlords having us there. We did quite an engagement piece with a number of landlords to look at what level of service they were providing and what the challenges were that were presenting, so that we could sort of understand what we would be likely to see. And that conversation is ongoing. So for those of you listening, if you haven't engaged with us and you have got different service arrangements to your usual business as usual, do give us a ring or drop us an email, let us know what they are, because what we're doing is we've been compiling a spreadsheet that our advice staff and our telephone staff can access easily when they're on the phone to residents, so that actually they can help with the managing of expectations as to what level of service they're likely to receive, and how best to pursue things. A lot of landlords told us they were reducing their complaint service as well as their repairs service. So again, we felt that was another reason for us to be staying open and as accessible as we could. It means that we are able to make sure that those really urgent cases that might slip through, we're able to help bring those to the attention of landlords and get them dealt with. Yeah, so I think that's sort of just really our reasoning there. But as I say, do please let us know if you've got any arrangements in place that we're not aware of. 4 areas came up from our discussion with those landlords. As I say, complaint handling was obviously the key thing we were asking about, given we're a complaint resolution service. And so lots of landlords are only having 1-stage response and then either suspending or that being the end of complaints procedure. We know of 5 landlords have confirmed that they have just completely suspended their internal complaints process for now. So it's difficult to give a sort of overview of what is in place all across the piece, but I would say that most landlords now are moving back to sort of fully operational complaint handling, with the exception of those that run panels as the final stage. Those are mainly not working, although there are some landlords that are doing it remotely. There are delays, and lots of landlords have suspended that final stage. Another area where we had to take a view was our requests. So when we're asking for evidence as part of our investigation, that was causing problems for some landlords for similar reasons to, as I described, our postal issue. If you're not in the office, sometimes it's physically difficult to provide the information we're requesting, the repair logs or whatever the contemporaneous evidence was. If you haven't got access to your files, that can be difficult. So again, what we're asking landlords to do in those instances is to let us know if there is a problem. We can suspend, put a pause, if you like, on the case until things are back up and running. Obviously, we would need to be letting the resident know what's going on. And we wouldn't do that sort of as a matter of course. So you will have to tell us if you've got a problem, but don't worry if you've got a problem, just let us know, is sort of the messaging I want to get over there. Other areas where landlords were having difficulties were where they had committed to take either improvement works or repair works, and were now in difficulties in delivering that. So that might be planned repairs, major works, general improvements where residents were expecting a certain level of service and they are now not getting that. And then a further area that came up for engagement with us was compliance with some of the Ombudsman's orders. Talk a little bit more about that now. So what we did in relation to our orders is sort of split into two parts, depending on whether it was an order that was made prior to the pandemic and the government guidance, and sort of compared to orders that we are making now. So with those sort of orders that were made prior to the government guidance, wherever possible, we're asking that you adhere to the timetables that we set. Now, I imagine most of those timescales will have passed or are coming to the point of passing. So again, the position is, if you can't adhere to those timeframes, let us know. Again, we completely understand that the situation is both bizarre and terrifying, and it would be completely unreasonable of us to ask you to go into a resident's home who doesn't want you in there, where your worker doesn't want to go in there to do a repair. So we are not going to be enforcing that at this point in time, but we do need to know so we can keep the resident informed, and we can mark the case, pause our sort of enforcement action accordingly. Case, as I said, really, I've sort of gone through most of what's on that slide. I think that we can just move the deadline so that once things are back to normal, we can then come back to you and the resident and work out what a realistic time frame will be. And again, I sort of emphasize that this hasn't been done as a matter of cause on every order that we have made. We are relying on you to let us know where there's an issue, and to come back to us. So for any new orders we're making, we've added a new paragraph referring to the government guidance. We are asking staff and managers to check that any orders made fit within the government guidance. Where appropriate, we are avoiding setting a time frame for compliance, but are wording it so that we will come back and revisit that when we think it's safe for, if it relates to work or accessing a resident's home, when we think it's safe for that to be done. So again, we'll be keeping in touch with those landlords that has an impact on. In relation to compensation for both, whether it was an old order or a new order, we would be expecting landlords to make that payment, and to undertake urgent repairs within the agreed timescale, wherever that's possible. Again, I would just sort of stress that just be sensible, don't take risks. Any concerns, just let us know. I hope that makes sense and seems sensible. So what have we seen that's different? Well, aside from the sort of changes to what landlords are offering, which is, sort of, as I said, different across the piece, what we've found is that we are having far fewer contacts from residents, but those who have been telephoning us in particular tend to be the more or most vulnerable and are distressed and upset by the situation. So our calls have been noticeably longer and noticeably more with very sort of vulnerable residents. Repairs is still a key area for complaint, still the most popular coming through. Some residents, it's a bit of a mixed bag, so some residents don't want repairs, whatever it is, they don't want staff coming into their home. Others are dissatisfied because staff aren't coming into their home. So as always with complaints, it's what the issue is in that individual case. We've also seen a large increase in sort of antisocial behaviour complaints. I guess the situation with sort of households having to stay home is exacerbating relations with neighbours that were already strained, but also there is that expectation that landlords will get involved where there are concerns that neighbours are not adhering to social distancing, or are, having house or inviting people round. So a bit of a blurring of what the landlord's role is there, and certainly residents' expectations are almost that landlords would be policing this. So we'll be doing a bit of managing expectations in that regard. But I'd be interested to know whether you're seeing those complaints are presenting themselves to you. Other areas that sort of relate to the pandemic really would be estate management type things. So there are, again, a bit of a mix. So some complaints are about caretaker being too near or not social distancing. Other complaints are there is no caretaker at this time when you would expect communal areas to be clean. There are complaints about lifts and how to use lifts, and signage in communal areas only being in English. Those type of areas about sort of how managing the situation within those communal areas, and quite a few complaints about fly tipping, rubbish collection, odds and sods of households being left in inappropriate places and not picked up. As I say, we are seeing a lot fewer complaints. So our complaint numbers for April were pretty much down 60% compared to last year. I think that's probably reflective of most residents being sympathetic and understanding to the situation, staying home, and really their concerns are about them and their family's well-being. Lots of residents we speak to are understanding about difficulties presenting for landlords. What we are not sure about, and again, be really interested to see what you're saying, is whether this means that somewhere further down the line there's a tsunami of complaints that are going to come our way and your way. So again, be quite interested to hear what you've got to say there. That's kind of a whistle-stop tour on what we've been doing, what we've seen that's different, why we chose to stay open. I will pause here and see if there's any questions or any information that you would like to share. So that's me for a bit.
Cheers, Emma. That's it's really interesting just to get that current picture. Yes, I'd urge attendees to post their questions on the Q&A function. You might want to come back and give Emma some feedback on the issues she's just raised there. We haven't got any questions come in just yet,
Okay.
Emma, but I've got loads of questions, if that's all right. In terms of your slide there, I would echo that your experience is very similar to what we're picking up. I've been hosting sometimes fortnightly, sometimes 3 weekly, sometimes 4 weekly meetings with our members on a regional basis, and by specialist clubs. That's like Housing for Older People, yeah, and Supported. And basically your list there chimes very much with the experience we're getting from the rest of the country. You've got tenants that think staff are getting too close. You've got tenants that think they're staying away. You've got people that want repairs, that don't want repairs, that want enhanced cleaning, don't want enhanced. And so yeah, it's really difficult keeping everybody happy. And I think it also chimes very much with what the regulators found. I'm sure you're aware the regulators issued a survey to the bigger associations to understand the operational issues that they're facing and some of the difficulties. And again, all of this chimes. It's really interesting that there was very we were getting very little reports, say in the first 3 weeks or so of the lockdown of ASB, but kind of as we've gone through April and into May, those niggles, people niggling at each other, people also, some of it could be argued to be ASB, some of it is a lack of tolerance perhaps as everybody's cooped up, and there's also this expectation that all of a sudden landlords are policing social distancing. So you touched on it slightly. I'd just be interested in your take on the extent to which you think landlords should be getting stuck into policing social distancing.
I would not see that as a landlord obligation, actually. I think if that's the government expectation, then that needs to be made explicit. Would be my view. I think it would be very difficult for landlords to get involved at that level. I would put that out to those on the front line. Are you seeing this? Are you dealing with it? What's your take? What is your organisation doing?
Well, again, I can sort of answer, I think, on behalf of quite a lot, and they are trying to keep as it were, trying to keep a distance from that. They're trying not to get involved, and because I'm a bit of an anorak as well, I actually looked at the original regulations. I'm not talking about guidance, but the actual government statutory instrument that sits behind the powers that have been introduced under the Public Health Act. And there are certain designated persons within the who can enforce this. And it doesn't say local housing officers, that's for sure. So we're talking about we're talking about some local authority members of staff, but we're largely talking about the police. So anyway, it's good to know. I think that'll put people's mind to rest that there isn't this big expectation from yourselves that they get stuck into all of this. I've got another question as well whilst we're on it, because I think it will be of interest to people. You flagged those 3 key complaints areas. I'm just wondering, especially with responsive repairs and ASB, what are the main aspects of those services that landlords are getting wrong? And what would your tips be? What would your good practice tips be for getting it right?
I think what runs through the themes that run through the maladministration findings are poor communication. So a lot of time there might be stuff going on in the background and residents are simply not aware. So for repairs, for example, I would say the issues are communication, but delays, non-attendance. I mean, we see lots of cases where a repair is raised, an inspection done, and then no follow-on work. And then a complaint is raised and a further inspection is done, and then no follow-on work. And we see cases where that can be the situation for 2 years, where actually somebody is sitting in a home where there's an ongoing leak from an upstairs flat. So running through, I think the causes are, we go communication, delays. What else would we have? Sort of record keeping for us is a real issue, because our decisions have to be based on evidence. So sometimes it's apparent that things have been going on, but there is no evidence as to what that was, and the landlord can't, usually the complaint staff aren't able to tell us, and that causes a problem for our investigation, but also for managing the residents' expectations. But keeping, doing what you said you were going to do, communicating with the resident, not leaving great big long gaps, delays. There's a repairs report that we did last year that's got some good practice guidance in it, we are about to, at some point in the next couple of months, we will be issuing one on leasehold. That's sort of trying to flag up the issues we see there, because there, for leaseholders, we see a much higher percentage of maladministration findings for leaseholders. I think there's some issues there about staff having the confidence and the knowledge to respond to leasehold queries. So we're trying to do more on the sort of sharing good practice and giving more information on what we see. But there is the repairs report. We haven't done an antisocial behaviour one yet, but it's on the list. But the big themes, I think, are as I've said, really, what we always see is a lack of communication, a lack of following through, delivering on your promises, and delays.
Right. And just briefly, I mean, as far as complaints, providers' own complaints services are concerned, what does a really good complaint service look like?
Well, that leads me on. You're going into my next bit of my presentation.
Oh, right. So it's in there. Brilliant. Okay. Well,
no. It's not in there, but I will talk about what we are doing to get something out there. Basically, is what I do. We're about to release a complaint handling code, which gives guidance of what we expect to see, and to some degree what we are asking landlords to do.
Right. Okay, we've got some questions coming in now, so
okay.
I'll just run through it with you. It's a bit of a big one, so I'm going to have to read it. This is from Michelle Lambert at Norwich Housing Society, which they do independent living for the over 60s. And it's a bit of a question, and it's a bit of feedback as well, I think, that you're asking for. She's saying that our complaints have mostly been tenants that are concerned about gatherings of people who are socialising in areas around the schemes. We've been asked to remove benches, etc., to prevent people gathering, and some of our signs have been removed. We are replacing signs and phoning the offenders, but some of our residents think we should be policing the scheme, so it goes back to that issue.
Yeah.
We've also advised tenants to call the police and report incidents if they feel particularly concerned. What else can we do?
I mean, I think what you're doing is the right thing there. There has been some additional guidance from government, but largely that's about accessing homes. It's about keeping the areas clean and ensuring that there is that distancing. But I don't think there's much more you can do in relation to those the gatherings that aren't necessarily antisocial. So they're just people together. And now the guidance is that you can have gather where you can meet two members of your family can meet, can't they? But as long as you're keeping the social distancing. So it's becoming more muddy, I think, as to what those expectations are for people in those communal areas. I think removing the benches is a good idea. So actually, you've got there is that distance maintained. I don't think. I mean, phoning residents. I don't know how that goes down. Does that cause you more problems with those residents afterwards? I don't know. But it sounds like you're doing everything you can in that situation.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. Just an observation here from Thomas Coggins. He's saying basically that police are struggling to keep on top of social distancing. So tenants seem to increasingly be turning to their landlords. That's his observation. Bo Rickaby is. Bo Rickaby was. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No. I agree. Which is again my experience talking to tons of landlords is that this wasn't a problem, but it's kind of materialised more over the second half of the lockdown, probably out of that frustration. Yes, I think Bo Rickaby is really keen on getting your repairs good practice. So I'm sure we can find a link for that on your website. Would that You right?
Yeah, you can. I can send one to you if that's easier.
Right. Oh no, that would be brilliant, and we'll stick it on as soon as this is finished or whatever, and you send it through to us. We'll stick it on our website along with a recording of this. So that would be brilliant. And finally, for this part one, Leslie Lanyon, Sheehan down in London, where it's down for me because I'm in Derbyshire. He's saying how's the Ombudsman expecting housing associations to address complaints made by serial or vexatious complainers during this period?
I would say in relation to that, I don't think our advice would change. We expect landlords to have policies on how they're going to deal with unacceptable behaviour and to stick to them. Largely what our advice is, and you can, again, I'll send you our policy as well, so you've got our policy there, which we often send out to landlords and go, well, try applying this if you haven't got one, is separate the two issues out. So what is the complaint? Is there something there that needs responding to? What's the actual issue behind the complaint? So deal with the complaint and then deal with the behaviour. So if they're putting unreasonable expectations on you, if there's unreasonable demands coming through, we are familiar with complainants who complain, on a daily basis, if not more frequently, often the same issue. It's just that another email. So if they're putting unreasonable demands on your service, then I think you have an obligation to deal with that behaviour. So it can be, some of the suggestions we would make are either just telling them you're not going to respond if you've already responded. If there is an ongoing issue that needs to be dealt with, then give them a time frame for when you're going to speak. So I have people who, I know we say, well, we will call you once a month and we will give you an update on your 17 complaints that we have from you, but we're not going to take a call from you in the meantime. And if you send an email, unless there's something that is urgent, we will not be responding to it. You'll get your monthly update. Sometimes that might be 2 weeks, sometimes it might be more frequent, depending on what the presenting issue is, how much there is to deal with, how urgent the things are. For us, it's slightly different because our investigations are always retrospective, so we're sort of looking backwards. Well, we are looking backwards. So the presenting issue is not as urgent for us. So we can say, we'll get back to you in a month, or we'll get back to you in 3 weeks, and that might not be appropriate for some landlords if you've got a really urgent presenting complaint there. So separate out the two issues, deal with the complaint, deal with the behaviour. I'm happy to, like I said, I will send with the repairs log, I'll send our ASB, unacceptable behaviour guidance, so you can have a look at that as well.
Okay, thanks, Emma. I think someone's just said that your microphone's gone a little bit quiet, so I don't know if...
Should I try it without?
Oh, no, that was all right.
Oh. Can you hear me?
No, I think you just moved it just a little bit. No, I think it's fine.
Should I put it back or leave it off? I'll leave it off for now, if you can hear me.
I do think it was probably a little bit better with it on. Sorry.
It's hot. Okay, better?
Yeah. No, that's definitely better. All right. I think we're all up to date. I think we'll crack on with the second half.
Okay, crack on. So the next bit I wanted to look at is really just some of the changes that are coming about as a result of the Green Paper. And we don't have any insight or sight of what's going to be in the White Paper. But our whole response to the Green Paper was about what we could do as an ombudsman to start addressing some of residents' concerns without the need for legislation. So just to remind us, just a slide taking some of the quotes from the Green Paper, just to remind us of what the issues are. And really, I'm only dealing with Chapter 2 of the Green Paper, the effective resolution of complaints for residents. Okay. So what we have done is we looked at our scheme and have made changes to our scheme, which were sent off to the Secretary of State and have been approved. We had originally intended to be working with the sector about the changes now, from sort of March, April onwards, and to have the scheme implemented in July. We've moved that back to start work with the sector sort of as probably the beginning of June, and to implement the scheme 1st September. So what you'll see in the new scheme is that we are trying much more to be a more proactive Ombudsman Service. We are looking at developing a complaint handling code, which will be sent out to you, I would think, in the next 6 weeks, if not sooner, but we're still going through our consulting stage at the minute. We're looking to be able to issue complaint handling failure orders. We're looking at systemic investigations and thematic investigations. And by the end of the year, we want to be publishing landlord complaint handling performance details. So each of you will be able to look up a report for your landlord telling you what complaints we've seen, not in great detail, but you'll get the sort of what was the complaints about, how many did we have, how does that compare to similar organisations and across the sector as a whole, and what were our findings. And we're also looking to be able to publish all determinations, which would include naming the landlord, and the development of more insight reports like the repairs report that I mentioned earlier. I will whiz through what all of that means now, because I know it's quite a lot there. So the scheme introduces new membership obligations. They're not that dissimilar to what was there previously, but there is a bit more there. So as before, landlords agree to be bound by the terms of the scheme. There's an obligation to establish and maintain a complaints procedure that's in accordance with good practice recommended by the Ombudsman. So that's slightly tweaked, slightly strengthening that there. As part of that procedure, to inform residents of their right to bring the complaints to the Ombudsman under the scheme, which reflects the legislation that was there previously. To publish complaints procedure and, where applicable, its membership of the scheme. That's for some landlords. There's only some complaints that go here and some go somewhere else, go to the LGSCO. And to make information about both easily accessible to those entitled to complain on your website, if you have one, and in correspondence with residents. So that's, again, slightly strengthening the obligation there. To manage complaints with residents in accordance with your published procedure, or where this isn't possible within a reasonable timescale. Now, that's new, but you would be amazed at how many complaints we see that aren't managed in accordance with complaints procedures. And there's the obligation to provide evidence when the Ombudsman requests, which again has always been there. So all of this is looking to really help support residents in making a complaint, to speed up internal complaints procedures and remove the barriers where we see residents getting stuck in landlords' complaints procedures. And again, all of this is in response to the issues are highlighted in the Green Paper. So the complaint handling code. Now, we've started work on this. We started work on this at the beginning of the year. We've worked with CIH and NHF and TPAS and Tarot and Arch and the ALMO group, whose acronym I can't quite remember. And some landlords have also been involved and had an input into what we think should be in a complaint handling code. So what we're developing is this sort of high-level framework to try and support effective complaint handling, with the aim to improve complaint handling across the sector and have greater consistency levels for residents, so that if whoever you're complaining to you broadly will be getting a similar response within a similar time frame. And the aim is to actually help landlords to quickly resolve complaints and to use learning from complaints to drive that service improvements. So as I say, we will be, it's not quite finalised. We have a session with our panel of advisors in next week, actually, where we will be getting their comments, and then we'll be doing our final draft. So that will be coming your way very soon. There will be a period of time when we are not applying it to give time for transition. Again, I'm sorry, I don't have. I know the broad brushstrokes, but we haven't finessed the details of our timetable yet. So, but it's coming. So, under the new scheme, we are now able to issue complaint handling failure orders, and those would be sort of in the following circumstances, really sort of flowing through from the scheme membership obligations that I mentioned. So non-compliance without good reason with the complaint handling code. So the code is not full of you must. It's kind of you should, or you might want to, or you should consider. But some of it is you must. So a complaint procedure must. And if you're not complying with those elements, which are things like you must respond within a reasonable time frame, and it gives some, we give 15 working days with then a further 15 working days. So it's quite a long time to respond. Then there may be good reason why you can't respond in that time, and what we're asking again is that you let us know if that's the case. If there is good reason, then you're not going to get a complaint handling failure order. But if you're just not responding, if a complainant cannot get a complaint through a complaints procedure, then that might be sufficient. So inaccessible complaints process. So we have, from time to time, these crop up where actually we get inundated with phone calls from residents from a particular landlord because they can't get response to the complaint. They've emailed, they've made a formal complaint by letter, they've put it on their website, they get no response. Often in those circumstances, we have similar problems getting response from a landlord. So if a complainant can't actually make a complaint to you, that may well end up in a complaint handling failure order. If you're refusing to deal with a complaint, and we don't think that you have a valid reason for doing that, that might also result in a complaint handling failure order. Not progressing, which I've sort of talked about, we get loads and loads of residents who cannot get past the stage 1. And the other issue, which relates partly to our investigations, but that's sort of delaying a final resolution for the resident. So failing to provide evidence to support investigations. So when we're asking, so we have one case where I know we've waited more than 9 months with endless chasing letters, endless telephones, endless promises, and we still haven't got the evidence that we need to investigate. A landlord's complaint handling failure record will be reported to the regulator, and it will form part of the reports that I talked about that we're going to publish on the website. So giving residents a bit more of an overview of their landlord's complaint handling. Now what I should say is they're not going to be just issued. You will get a letter giving you 15 days to do whatever it is that we think is causing the problem. If we don't hear back from you, you get another 2 weeks. If we still don't hear back from you, or we don't think you've got a good reason, you get a further week, and your chief exec will be told. And if you still don't do it, then we will issue. So it is not we want to be finger waggy and be telling you off. It is really, we are trying to drive service improvement through complaint handling. So the idea is not that it's like it's supposed to be like a yellow card. You know, it's a warning. It's like there is something amiss here that needs to be sorted out, and if you don't, it's going to lead to all sorts of trouble later in the line. So that's its intention. And like I said, you will be given plenty of notice of what the issue is and plenty of time to actually put it right. Well, I can see we're getting questions. Yay! Okay, I will just plow on because there's more.
Oh.
So this new scheme also allows us to take wider and deeper investigations into landlords. Now, the wording of the scheme allows us to look further to see if we believe there is evidence of a systemic issue. If we find that there is, we would refer to the regulator as now. We've sought these extra powers basically because what we are reliant on often is where we find something may be a systemic issue. We have to wait to see if another complaint comes in of the same type, rather than being able to go out and go, well, actually, this was an issue in this property. Does that mean, I don't know, that contractor was in all your properties and there's an issue with all your electric checks? We don't have that power at the minute. So it's to allow us to do further investigation to go, actually, yeah, there is a bit of an issue here and we think the regulator needs to get involved. So that's sort of widening our role to sort of look further into systemic issues. But we also want to be able to do more work on where there's a sort of thematic, it's not necessarily a systemic issue, but a thematic issue that we see that's across the sector that could potentially be causing problems for residents. And the most common thing, and easy to sort of distinguish between the two, are things like missed appointments. So we see endless complaints with missed appointments. They're often not the substantive complaint that we investigate that relates to a particular repair, but there is some work that we could do about how much is this costing organisations, how much is it costing residents, these missed appointments. So that's the idea about the thematic investigations, that there are things that we could be really helping flag up, shine a light on, that we're not doing at the minute. So that's what I meant about this sort of proactive ombudsman role. We're trying to do more about highlighting where there is a problem that needs to be fixed. Okay. And then, as I say, the publication of landlord information. This has been on our list of things to do for a number of years. And if those of you who've come to any sessions I have run, I always say this, but this year I really do think it's going to happen. We've expanded our staff base a bit this year. Obviously, recruitment has been put on hold, but we will be getting data analysis in place to help get this information together. So the plan is in the next quarter to send each landlord their information so that actually you get to review it and see what it includes, check the accuracy, etc. And then by the end of the year to get that up on the website so that everybody can see. We will also be publishing determinations, and this has been quite a long project trying to get casework consistency improved, to get all the systems in place, to pull from our casework system onto our website so that you can access the determinations. Still a piece of work to do to go through how we identify when those risks are too great and when we will be not publishing. But that is in place. Everything's on track to get that up and running by March. Touch wood, this year. It's coming, basically, and lots of other ombudsmen do this, but I know it does make landlords a bit nervous from time to time. But actually, there'll be so much information out there. All the things that you do well will also be out there. All those investigations where we find no mal, and will also be out there. So there will be a lot of information out there for residents. Oh, and I think that's it. So I'm happy to take questions now. And you have got contact details there. So if anything occurs to you after, please feel free to just send an email. Just put Emma, it will get to me. Okay.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, I think that was really comprehensive, canter through how things are going to be. So I think it's really useful. Just how long have we got? We've got about 7 minutes. We've got a couple of questions come in. Bo Rickaby again is saying there was an interesting comment that you made about the level of complaints that don't stop forever at stage 1. Are there any common reasons why complaints get stuck at stage 1?
I think I would say it falls into 2 categories. One is where there's often a system problem behind that. If we see a flurry of residents from one particular landlord, there is a system change going on, or there is a system problem, usually that the landlord is aware of, and that takes a little bit of time to get sorted. So that would be one area. And I think with individuals that tend to get stuck there can be, I would say that there's a bit more of a plethora of issues. So it can be their articulation of what is a complaint, or their expectation of what is a complaint. There are also just times where, for some inexplicable reason, they just do not get a response. So they don't even get a response saying we're not dealing with that as a complaint. It's just it just goes into a void, and nothing comes back. And I can't give much insight into what is behind that. Perhaps just sort of the overworking of complaints departments. I'm not, but I don't know what drives that. Sorry.
Right, okay. And this might be a case of no news is good news, but Paul Martin, who I think is over there in Rutland, is saying, in terms of you reporting the landlord report where you're naming landlords, how will you present those landlords that have no complaints? Because I suppose to some extent his point is if you're not named at all, it's almost like you don't exist. But how you present the fact that there's tons of landlords out there that are doing a good job, it's just that nobody ever complains about them.
I guess the report will still be there, but it will be showing 0 complaints. We haven't gone again. I'm a bit remiss on the detail there, but I think the intention is that every landlord, you ought to be able to do an alphabetical search. That landlord will come up, and it will tell you, the last 3 years record that we have of complaints that we've seen. Some of it is to your benefit. I mean, I think lots of it is to your benefit, but it tells you how many residents are contacting us that might not be complaining. So it will be any inquiries we get that haven't necessarily even made a complaint to you recorded, and it will record what they came to us about. So it gives you some extra insight, but the intention is that if you are having no complaints, then that would be reflected in the report. I have a caveat to no complaints, in that sometimes no complaints isn't necessarily a good thing. Obviously, I would say that I'm working for an ombudsman, but it may indicate that there's a block, that actually complaints are not being dealt with. So we have to think of a way of presenting no complaints. That's just a sort of a caveat, really.
Okay, well, I'm conscious we're getting to the witching hour, but just a quick one from David Chafee down in Brighton. What are your current timescales for reviewing a complaint received?
Investigation times last year were an average of 5.8 months. I'm not sure if you're asking about that or if you're asking about a review that of that determination, which are lengthy at the minute. So part of our reorganisation and our new operating model is to set up an individual team to deal with those reviews, because we are a bit backed up on reviews. I don't know the actual time scale at the minute, but we do know that we've got an issue there, and a new team actually has been recruited, but we haven't switched over to new process yet. So getting faster, hopefully.
Okay. Just one final last one is your publication of determinations. Is there any way of kind of doing it in a way that the determination could lead on to good practice? So you can actually, let's have a look. It could be turned into a resource where you could look up complaints by outcome or theme.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, so we've been working with I can't remember their name, but anyway, the guys who are doing it, looking at the search filters, and trying to make it so that it is a resource for the sector, and certainly for our caseworkers as well, so that it really is a useful tool rather than just doing it for the sake of doing it. It is supposed to be a working tool.
Yeah. No, that sounds great. That sounds great. And we're virtually up for time. Got through all of the presentation, got through all of the questions. Emma, I think it was just really, really helpful. So thanks so much for doing this. Would you be happy to come back and talk to us again in a few months' time or so? Hopefully, as we get back to normal.
Of course, yeah. I mean, certainly once the code's out there, it may well be that that's a good point to come and talk to you all again and get your views.
That would be great, and I'd certainly offer up Acuity as being a conduit for you, getting some feedback on that. That would be great. So again, thanks so much for your time, and all you that are kind of listening in. Thanks again for attending this. We'll have a recording of this available on our website. We'll have Emma's slides, and we'll have the other bump that she was talking about. So once again, thanks everybody, and don't forget to check our website for the remaining webinars that we've got throughout May. I think next up is the CIH doing some future gazing about the policy environment as we go forward, which I note Emma's signed up to as well.
I did. It sounded interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be. I was talking to Gavin yesterday about what he's going to cover, and it's just going to be brilliant. It's going to be just a huge sweep of the operating environment that will just provide a fantastic contextual base going forward. So anyway, that's what's up next. So thanks everybody, and hope to see you at one of these next week.
Yep.
Bye bye.
Thanks very much.